Hello and welcome to Wonder in the Weeds. It's just me today, your host, Christy Ritz-King. I am not here with my Gen Z counterpart, but we're going to talk a lot about her because today's episode is really more wonder than weeds, but I guess the weeds could be sort of figuring out who you are and your identity as an empty nester when you have adult kids. The wonder is those adult kids. And if you're not watching, you cannot see that I have a little pet friend joining me today on the podcast. And that is largely because of what we're going to talk about. I'm just back from a 5-day, I think, little road trip. I have a family member in Colorado. And so two of my adult kids and I hopped in the car over the long weekend and headed west to visit them he and his wife, my nephew and his wife, out in Colorado. This trip to Colorado was a really interesting time for me to reflect on some stuff. You know, I posted a picture on Instagram of my bag full of my laptop and my camera and my microphones and everything else. And I said, you know, this bag is full of good intentions because I left town thinking, oh, I'm going to write so much and I'm going to record a couple podcasts. I didn't do any of it. I didn't touch anything. I barely even looked at my phone the whole time we were there. I was so sort of not only in the moment and in awe. This is my first time to the mountains of Colorado, and I was just delighted the entire time. I fell in love with the place. But also just to be really aware and present with my kids. You know, one of them lives here. She's on the show with me every other week, but one of them has been away at school on the East Coast for, 9 months, the last 9 months. And so he's a little different than when I left him in the fall. He's the same guy, but he's just, a little more grown, a little more confident, a little more sure of himself. And the relationships we have now as adults were really on display this weekend with us, driving 13 hours and then being with my my nephew and his wife, whom my kids adore. And the feeling is mutual. We all are sort of in love with one another. And so it was just great fun. They're really funny people, all of them. My nephew, my niece, my kids. They're really funny people. So it was just a really interesting weekend of sort of stepping back and seeing my life as it is now as a mother of these adult kids. And part of that reason was because we were always big road trippers. When we were really young and they were really young and we were dead broke, that was all we could do was drive to visit family and, wherever the free place was to stay. Those were our vacations. And then as they got older, still a lot of times for financial reasons, because flying a family of 5 is never reasonable, but also sometimes just because we loved it. We loved road trips. I love a road trip, and I kind of brought my kids up to love road trips. And so we've taken a lot. So I've sort of at every stage of their lives, we have a road trip story. And so to be with 2/3 of them, we actually called the third one on the road because it just felt like we needed her voice in the car to make the thing complete. But to be in the car with these adult kids after having been with them when they're, teeny tiny, and then school age, and then middle schoolers, and then high schoolers, and then to have I was taking a trip almost with like adult friends. I still paid for everything. So that's the only difference between going with your adult friends and going with your children, is that they're still your children when you're on vacation. But anyway, it was just a really interesting time for me to sort of notice, I guess, what it's like to have these kind of adult relationships with your kids, and quite frankly with my nephew, because I was only in 8th grade when he was born. He and his brother were born. And so they are we kind of grew up together a little bit too. I mean, 13 years is a lot, when you're 13 and 26 or something, but I was a babysitter for them some summers. And then I kind of, I would go to their sporting events and academic things and graduations and stuff like that. They've been part of my life, almost like little siblings. And there was a time where I felt sort of maternal over them too. They have wonderful parents, but my brother and sister-in-law are great parents, but I just felt like, once I started having kids, I sort of looked at my nephews as part of my kids too. That mom thing is hard to find. I mean, it's hard to fight. And so when we got to his house and I was with all of them, I was sort of reflecting and noticing like the difference in the relationships as adults with all of them, with my kids and with my nephew. And so that was really, it was really interesting. And I felt like it was a really important to talk about here because I think if you're in the state, if you're in any stage of parenting and you're like, what, what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I, am I passing on things that I want to pass on? Am I not passing on things I don't want to pass on? I think all of those questions are really valid and happen. And I just felt like, oh, good. I want to give somebody some perspective from the other side of this and let them know. Because one of the things I preach all the time when I work with parents is, I sort of have these like four concepts, four pillars, whatever, of the parenting it's not a philosophy. Let's not get crazy, but like the parenting speak, this idea of explicit parenting that I've been talking about now for 15 years. One of those pillars, one of those really core concepts is what kind of relationship do you want? So I talk a lot with parents, especially parents who haven't, who are expecting or are adopting or whatever, like they don't have the baby in their life yet. I talk a lot about expectations for yourself as a parent, expectations for your kid as they age and grow, and expectations for the relationship you want to have. We do a lot of sort of reflective work on what do you want your life with this person to look like in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I always call it the like sitting on the beach moment. Like when you're sitting on the beach with your adult child, what do you want that to feel like and look like? What conversations are you having? What are you arguing about? What are you, agreeing about? What do you both notice in the situation? That kind of stuff. We do a lot of that sort of reflective work together because we do a lot of that reflective work together because I don't think that is a natural, I think it's a natural feeling, but we're not always aware of it. So that said, after this weekend, I thought, oh, I got to talk about how this weekend went because this was what I wanted. The relationship I now have with my kids as adults is exactly what I would have said I wanted it to be when they were 3, 5, 10, those kind of things. And it is like, I always hesitate to use the word friend because that makes it sound like I'm not still their mom and I don't still have a little bit of separation of like, we're not peers. We're never going to be peers. But because they're older and they're more adults and we have had a relationship like we've had all of these years, we can tease each other and we can also support each other in a way that maybe like we notice things that you might want to know about or vice versa. Or like they can do it to me too. They can either say, you did this thing, it was good, or you did this thing and I hated it. Like we have a humility between us that is really respectful, I think. And that is what I love. I mean, I laughed so hard on this road trip because of the two of them and their shenanigans with one another, but also with me, like, them teasing me teasing them, that kind of fun. And I say teasing in a really like, it's not sarcasm, it's not biting. I mean, I guess that's not true. Sometimes it is biting now, but it wasn't like we haven't had a sarcastic relationship when they were little, so that they know if we sort of joke now that it's not mean-spirited and it's not like hiding something we really think about the other person. I mean, my son to my daughter, my oldest daughter, is like ruthless in the way he teases her. But there's also this clear like admiration and love, and they hang out together. They like hanging out together. So it's like, she doesn't mind it. She can take it. She's in on the joke because he is most of the time so kind and funny and loving and supportive. And can take the joke right back too. We can tease him right back and it's good. But we just, it was this beautiful balance of I drove the whole time. So it was this beautiful balance of me sort of still being the mom. I'm gonna make sure we have the right hotels. I'm gonna make sure we get gas in the car. I'm gonna stop when I need to stop for my own self. And I'm gonna ask you guys if you need to stop. I was still sort of in charge of it in that way. And I felt good about being able to do that because I think when you're a young adult, it can really feel overwhelming that you're in charge of everything. And so I think sometimes it's nice if your mom comes in and is like, hey, want to go on a vacation and I'm going to take care of everything. Like that's a huge privilege that I feel like I have to give to them. And I feel so lucky that they take me up on it. They didn't have to go. We didn't play. I planned this with my daughter, but she had to like take off work, and we had to like get our schedules together and everything else. And then my son got home and he said, I think I don't start work right away. So I think I can do this too. And he really genuinely wanted to come. And I feel so fortunate that that's the case, that like they want to hang out with me. Yes, I'm sure they want the free vacation, but also I think they don't mind hanging out with me. Maybe that I'm like not the first person they choose to hang out with, but they don't mind it. And they like each other enough, which is also something that I wanted for them when I had these, little babies. I wanted them to be friends when they were adults. And it seems like they are. They've gone out now a couple times by themselves. They jokingly, we called the third one because she wasn't with us and we were all missing her, and everybody's got jokes and funny things to say. And, I feel extremely lucky that I have the relationships I have with them and they have the relationships with each other. And I know it's not by accident. And I'm not going to take full credit for anything because humans are humans and they do what they do. But I will say that it's intentional. My husband and I wanted to foster in them a relationship, and we wanted us to have good adult relationships with them. And that drove a lot of our decisions when they were little. So if you're listening to this and you have little kids, or you have middle schoolers, or you have teenagers, and you're like, oh my God, I don't know who this like beast is that lives with me, it can be helpful sometimes to think of, how do I want them to view me later on? So when you're making choices about how to parent them when they're young, it can be helpful to think, well, what do I want them to take with them into the future about us, about how they can come to me, about how I can show up for them, about what I expect from them and for them and about them. And look, I don't know the full details of that story, so I'm not making any judgment on how that was done or not done, or how, if you did want to inquire the next day, like why did you feel like you had to lie to me? What happened at that party? Like I might have stepped in a little more as a teaching. I might have used that as a teaching moment for the kid. But whatever the case, this kid took away from it. My mom is always going to be there for me and is never going to punish me for reaching out for help. And that's the important lesson anyway. And it has me thinking, like, that was always my expectation and my hope for my children, was that they knew that no matter what, I was going to show up for them. And that didn't mean I was at every single function. It didn't mean I was at every single game. It didn't mean I was like hovering. But when shit hit the fan, they knew I was going to be their person to be the, to be the support staff, if you will. And I sort of feel like it's a little bit like that now. And for me, then, identity wise, I need to figure out, what does that look like now that they're no longer sort of under my care all the time. And not what does it look like to show up for them, but what does it look like for me when it's not my primary job. So take this weekend, for instance. So yes, I still drove. I still found, I navigated, I drove, I paid for the gas, I got us a hotel on the way, all those things. And there were times where, my niece went out to, I don't even know, run an errand or something. And the kids went with her. And I was like, I'm just going to stay here and read. Like, I don't need to be with you at all times. There was a time where they all went and ate at, the kitchen table, and I was reading a book, and I was like, I'm just going to stay over here and read this book. Like, I didn't need to be part of every single thing that happened with them. Like, I didn't need to, quote unquote, watch them when, they were there, and they made their own choices about what they wanted to do. And I made my own choices about what I wanted to do. Did I want to go? Did I not want to go? Did we all have drinks at dinner? Yes. Like, I'm not going to stop them or start them from doing that. Like, they're adults at this point. Did I would like to say I paid for them. I didn't. My nephew wouldn't let us pay for a single thing. but like, my oldest daughter sort of got him at one point and was able to pick up a tab for something. And I didn't sort of swoop in and try to do that. I let her, like, that's their relationship. They have a relationship with each other. So it was interesting because in some ways I felt like the mom, sort of in charge of the the road trip, and then in other ways I was like, "Oh, I'm just a guest like they are in this place, and we all get to decide what we wanna do when we wanna do it. I'm not responsible for them and their, like, good time while I'm here. I'm responsible for some things, but I'm not responsible for them, for their choices and decisions and, well-being, quite frankly. If they need something, they need to ask for something. I can't be sort of watching out to see if they have everything, and also, like, if they do something dumb, it's not on me." They didn't. But you know what I mean? Like if you're at someone's, we were at this house, if they like, I don't know, broke something or did something, like I would have, if they were younger, felt like, "Oh no, that's my responsibility. I should have been watching them and making sure they weren't going to do anything knuckleheady." But in this case, they're grown. And so it was on them to decide how to behave in the situation. And it wasn't a reflection of me, and that's new. As when they're kids, you're sort of responsible for that a little bit more than when they're adults. So it was a really interesting observation to see how we did this thing that we've always done together, this vacationing and this road trip together, but in a really different way, because they're not the same and I'm not the same and my job isn't the same and their jobs aren't the same within the family. Like, our roles are a little different because they're grown. And I wanted to talk about it on here because I wanted it to be almost like a light at the end of the tunnel for you if you're sort of in it with kids, whether they're 2 or 12. You're still in it, and you're sort of constantly, I think, as a parent, evolving and figuring out, well, what's my role now that they're at this stage? What's my role now that they're at this stage? You start out consumed by this human being, and they're you're watching their every move. You know what they eat, when they sleep, when they go to the bathroom, all of that stuff. And then even as they grow, you're constantly figuring out the push pull of, like, how much is mine and how much is theirs, and how much do I need to be over it and how much do I just need to be sort of guiding it. And then, you send them off into the world, whether it's to college or a job or whatever. They don't live under your roof anymore. And yet it's not like they're gone from your life, and it's not like they don't need you at all anymore. In fact, on this car trip, we talked about, like, that first time you get sick when you're away from your mom and how lonely that can feel. So yeah, as part of this road trip, even, we talked about the first time you get sick when you're away from home, and how it was for them, how that felt to be, like, in your college dorm or in your apartment or whatever, and you don't kind of know what to do or how to take care of yourself, and even the different ways the two of them reacted. Like, my oldest didn't call me until she was like, had to go to the ER, or the urgent care or whatever, because she couldn't kind of kick this thing with all the remedies she thought about. And then my younger one um would sort of call as if, yeah, as if, like, I could do something. And we talked about the perspective of, I even shared my perspective of when I remember that as a kid too, being like, what do I do? I'm away from my mom. How do I take care of myself? But then also the perspective of them in their experience, and then me as their parent, what my sort of role was on the other side of that, and feeling guilty about, I'm not there and I wish I was there and I wish I could just wrap you up in a blanket and make you soup or something. And how you kind of have to reconcile with that. Like, I cannot be there for you all the time in the same way that I've been before. And that doesn't mean I'm not here for you when you need it. They both called when they were sick. And so you still sort of want your mom when you're sick. But also, how do you navigate? How did I navigate it, and how did other kids' parents navigate it? And maybe I did some things that worked, and maybe they wish I did some things differently, and that's humbling, but also really good to hear too. We talked about, like, some kids who showed up with, like, an entire trunk full of, like, pharmaceutical stuff for when they got sick, and I just didn't do that. And maybe I should have. Maybe they would have felt better if I did. And I had to sort of take that and hear it as not a criticism or not a whatever, but as, like, oh, that's something to learn. I don't have anybody left to do it with, so I can't learn it for anybody. But it might have been a conversation I had with them of, like, do you think you want these things, or do at this point, do you need these things? I think in both cases, I Amazoned them some stuff when they were sick that they had, but Um, and also listening to the two of them and their perspectives and how different their perspectives were. And just that reminder that, like, when you have more than one, parenting doesn't look the same with all of them. The very different ways that the two of them not only handled being sick, but then also had opinions on what they would have done or wanted differently. They weren't the same as each other. And so I was like, well, as a parent, you can take that as like, well, you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. But also the other way of looking at it is like, when you know your individual kid and you don't just say like, well, this is what we do, or this is how we parent, or this is the way we've done it in the past, it can be more effective to say like, well, this is how we've done it in the past, but I know you are like this, or you need this, or you whatever. So should we do it this way? It's a little story time. We talked about the difference between dropping them off. And my oldest, because she's the oldest, had the other two with her when we dropped her off at college. And she had like a full, I don't know what, panic attack, whatever. Just, but she gets angry when she's like that. She gets mean when she's like that sometimes. And so she can come on here and defend herself later, don't worry, but she's fully aware of it. She basically kicked us all out of her room. Like the second that we arrived at college, she was like, nasty to us and nasty to her little brother, and just was like, get out. And so we went to I don't even know where, a Target or Walmart or something, and like bought her some things that she needed for the dorm room while she sort of unpacked and got herself situated. And then by the time we came back, she was in much better spirits. But so then we were talking about how my youngest, when we got him there, such a different situation. We had just moved. He didn't even have all of his things in the state because we were gone from where he was going to college. And so we were really minimalistic in how we packed him, and our thought was, all right, well, we got kicked out of the older one's dorm, so we'll just leave you for a little while and we'll go to the store and buy you the things you need that we weren't able to pack when we got here. And he was saying, and I was joking with him that like he didn't want more than one, like he wanted like one, it wasn't one roll of toilet paper, but you know what I mean? Like he didn't want a lot of anything. Like he didn't want the Costco trip of like, you buy all the cleaning supplies, you buy all the toilet paper, buy all the paper towels. He wanted like some of all of these things, which I respected, and went and just bought some, and then was like, waited for the phone call when he ran out of everything. But he said, oh, part of why I did that was I didn't want to be like the older one, like Faith, you know who she is. I didn't want to be like Faith and get mean at you and kick you out of my room. And so I was like, I don't want to be overwhelmed by the stuff. And I thought, isn't that funny? Like he brought with him her experience, and that dictated a little bit of how he behaved. And it never even occurred to me that's what he was doing. I just thought like he's overwhelmed and he doesn't want a lot of stuff because he knows he gets overwhelmed. And so I'm not going to buy him a lot of stuff, but also I got to figure out a way to teach him, like, you're going to run out of this in about 4 weeks and you live here. If you guys listen to this show on the regular, you remember Faith telling the story of only buying 12 cans of seltzer and thinking that was going to be enough for, like that realization of like, oh wait, I actually live here and I need more than 12 things. I felt like he was doing the same thing. He was having a moment of like, well, I'll be fine with 6 rolls of toilet paper. Like, who needs more than 6 rolls of toilet paper? And that's not at all what he was doing. What he was doing was understanding, if I get overwhelmed, I might be mean to them, and I don't want to be mean to them like my sister was. So I'm just going to try not to get overwhelmed. And then we kind of laughed about how the fact that like a month later, he was like going to the CVS to replace stuff, which is close to campus, but also outrageously expensive because it's the little drugstore close to campus. So everything is too much money there. And then finally he called me and said like, I'm kind of out of some things, because I didn't want to impose and call him. And he was kind of embarrassed to admit like, oh yeah, she told me I was going to need more stuff and I don't want to let her know any more stuff. But he was also going to run out of money if he had to keep buying, $30 toilet paper because he was buying it at the convenience store on campus. So it was just a really funny moment of like, not only being able to compare their two stories and hear their two sides of it, and how like much more than just me and my husband informed his behavior. He has this experience with these other two siblings that went to college. And so again, it's humbling in that like, oh yeah, we're not fully in charge of all of this stuff. And sort of sometimes no matter what we do, they're going to take with it what they want anyway. So like, don't worry so much. And also be aware of sort of who they are and what they're bringing to the table when you are making decisions about how to treat them and how to behave. So, I was walking around on tiptoes because I just moved this kid from his home and was sending him off to college now really far away from me and his dad. And so he got whatever he wanted last summer. Like he could do no wrong last summer. And still there are some things I could have done that would have been maybe better for him, and he wouldn't have felt them like punishment like I thought he might with all of the upheaval in his life. And the only reason I know that and that we're able to have those conversations are because we built this relationship that he knows he can be honest about my mistakes and his mistakes, and nobody's going to feel worse or be judged for it. And that's what I'm talking about when I say, what kind of relationship do you want with them when they're older? And it's not wholly in your control. They are who they are. They're humans. They're going to grow and interpret things a certain way and hear things a certain way. And that's the humbling part, is that you might have them share a story with you and you're like, that is not how I remember it going down at all. And they experienced it very differently than you would have thought they did. And so there's a little dash of humility and a little dash of understanding and a little dash of pride in how the relationships are that I have with my kids now. I feel like we did a lot of things right. And I feel like we did a lot of things wrong. And sometimes we did a lot of things that ended up wrong, that we didn't know were going to be wrong, or not even wrong, but like that they interpreted a certain way or they experienced a certain way that we did not intend for or think it was going to be that way. And so the bottom line is we did the best we could with the intention of having a healthy, open, kind relationship with our kids all along the way, respecting them for who they were at every stage of this, but also giving ourselves grace at every stage too, for when we did it wrong and when we did it right. In both cases, like take a little credit, but also know that, you're human and you're going to mess some stuff up, but also you're human and you can't possibly do everything all at one time for them. They're humans too, and they need to evolve and grow on their own as well. And so leaving some openness for that to happen, and then stepping back and sort of admiring it when it does. That's what I got the opportunity to do this weekend, was step back and really just enjoy them as human adult people in my life, but also take a little bit of, reaping of the rewards of that relationship. And that's what I wanted to convey to anybody out there listening that's sort of questioning or wondering how it's going to turn out, or, maybe you're in the stage where you're not talking to each other much, or they're really separating, or they're really far, or, maybe everything is wrong. You feel like you're doing everything wrong right now. So yeah, I'm just here to offer you a little bit of hope that it does get better. You are doing a great job. And as sad and sometimes lonely as empty nest time can be, there are also really, really wonderful rewards of having a relationship with adults that you raised. They're great fun if you let them be. And just soak up all the minutes you can while you can, because they are fewer and farther in between, but they're so rich when you get them. That's the wonder, is that the stolen moments you get with these adults are really like nothing I could have even imagined, even when I was trying to imagine it. They're better than I thought. So hang in there, keep doing what you're doing, and know that the payoff is really pretty great in the end. I don't really have a wonder, because I just kind of spent an entire thing talking about a wonder. I will say though that my wonder this week was like the environment too. Like, gosh, we were just in such a beautiful setting, and then we went to a couple other places that were a beautiful setting. We were in Boulder, Colorado, and then we went to this little town way up the mountain off a dirt road that had this like inn and little like general store that were built in like 18 something, and there was live music and a big barbecue. It was like a big family picnic, but it was just the neighborhood, and it was just the coolest thing. So it was just fun to be out somewhere with the kids, and I just kept saying, we can't believe we're here. Like, we stopped in Lincoln, Nebraska, and we just jokingly the whole time were like, we didn't never have Nebraska on our bingo card. And we moved out west, and so now our road trips are a little different than, North Carolina or Florida or Vermont or Maine, or like we spent a lot of their childhood going up and down the East Coast and or west to West Virginia and Pittsburgh and things like that, but never this far out and never these environments. And so that was probably the wonder, was like, gosh, there's a big old world out there, and we get to see it. And aren't we so lucky for that? And what am I reading, watching, listening to? We listened to a lot of I'm still on the Noah Khan album, you guys. I hate to tell you, but we listened to a lot of that. We listened to a lot of old stuff on the way out there. And I don't really have anything that like is sticking with me. I just finished a book called The Frozen River, which I'll be honest, I don't know if I recommend it. It was dense. That's how I would describe it. And also a really rich story. So maybe I'd recommend it, but it's not an easy read. It's not a fluffy read, and it's not one that you're going to finish quickly, I don't think, but it was worth it. So yeah, The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon. It's Lawhon. So I don't know if it's just Lawhon, you say that how you want, but it's called The Frozen River. And it was like a Good Morning America pick, I think. It's interesting. It's set in, I think between 17 and 1800s, but also it has a lot of really interesting women's rights stuff. It's a midwife in a small town. There's a doctor from Harvard involved that, thinks he's better and she knows more. And then there's like women's rights. And it's actually, forget everything I said at the beginning about it being dense and not worth it. It's actually fascinating. It just is not it was not for me a quick read. And so sometimes that frustrates me. I'm like, oof, this is a lot of information. But it was, in the end, I was really glad that I had read it. So go check that one out. I don't really have anything else. If you guys can, leave in the comments or send me a little quick note with what you're reading and listening to and watching, because I'm in a rut right now. So help me out. All right, that's all I got. Keep looking for the wonder in the weeds. And until next time, take care of yourself. Bye.